if I could welcome the previous three speakers to the stage as well. So I think there's another microphone somewhere, and it's over there on that side. So if there's any questions, please raise your hand and we'll bring the microphone over.
Hello. I have a question for the gentleman who spoke about philosophy and design. Of all that bricolage of philosophy that you put out in front of us, the one glaring omission was Michel de Certeau. Was that on purpose?
Well, if we were to cover everything, it's a lot to cover, you know, like, so de Certeau, you know, certainly if we were to expand this into a full-on thesis or a full-on paper, like, you know, it would be something that would be interesting to look at.
Let me follow up then and be more specific. De Certeau talks about strategies versus tactics.
Yeah.
In your example of the wall, you may argue that you're arguing for an epistemology of the wall. Mm-hmm. In using or transgressing the wall seems more an issue for de Certeau than for Deleuze and Guattari, who have really nothing much to say about the structured environment of everyday life.
No, that's true. Deleuze and Guattari didn't really talk about the structure of everyday, of actual built cities and stuff. They've never actually really talked about cities. They reference sort of the built, or rather physical forms, like through like earth, you know, like the geoformations, you know, like sort of earthquakes and stuff like that. Those were being referenced. What is key of this paper is actually not so much the wall itself. I was trying to use that as a sort of as a way to talk about how ideas transform. So the crux of this paper is actually about how through the act of design, through, you know, drawing, through conversations with people, that occurs in a design research process, thinking might sort of become sort of one might say sort of troubled, and then, but from this like troubled moment, new kinds of concepts may be formed. So that was actually the crux of the paper, rather than sort of the wall itself.
But what about the notion of transgression within that? I don't understand why you don't take that up.
You could talk about transgression, but again, as I said, the crux of the paper is not so much the wall itself, but the idea of like philosophizing through design.
Okay, I can see we can talk about this later. Thanks.
Any other questions?
So my question is for Chinwei about your kind of the paper I really appreciated, and I see what you're trying to do is establish a kind of genealogy for these different programs in urban design. But then you, in your kind of final analysis of the programs, you put the London School of Economics up there also, but haven't seemed to have constructed much of a genealogy for that one. So I wonder if you can say a little bit more about where that comes from, which I think you characterized as a kind of physical, social, looking at cities that went beyond professionalism. So I'm wondering if maybe there's a way you can think about what kind of professionalism means in urban design, and is that program promoting a different model that's something outside of that professionalism, or how you would frame that?
Hello. Thank you. First of all, thank you for your question. If I'm going to answer what I have been all gone through for this question, it maybe take another 15 minutes. But in short, I would like to say, basically, I would like to provide an idea like we can, because today is a conference about urban design, so it may definitely have things to do more or less about how we define or how we redefine urban design, what urban design is. But today I would like to say, maybe urban design is not something we can really try to summarize, because as we can see today, definitely we need to, in most of the architecture or planning schools, they have the urban design program, but it's never like for the undergrad or for the PhD, but basically for the master program. So it basically serves as a plus for the traditionally trained designers in the field. But today I would like to, the reason why I try to provide my personal view regarding the conference I attend in London is about because most of the program directors, they went to the conference and talk about their studio works. And I definitely see another way to think about urban design because for design, I mean, urban design still serves much more like a process, but I mean, the answer, the solution remains lays in the traditional field like architecture or planning or landscape. But what we put urban in front of it, because urban here, for urban design, it serves as much more like a ever-shifting scale for you to measure the scope that you are going to handle and you are going to tackle on. So it basically must include so many different social layers as well as cultural perspective. So I think the LLEC program, the urban design program, shows us a groundbreaking dimension is about how the urban design can serve as a much more like another approach to assess practice, because I think the difference why we need the urban designer from architecture and from planning school, but we also need urban designer from social science institutions like LLSC. It because of maybe the clients, because it serves to different clients we need. For example, like for the government, they need to talk about the public interest, and then you may need the people trained from LLSC, and by doing that, you also need some urban designer trained traditionally by the architecture and the planning schools who knows the language and the formalistic things that usually traditional designer use, so enable to make the connection, the bridge-like connection I mentioned, to articulate the two different fields. But it serves like a connection, so by which there is more actors can assess this connection, and in doing so, being able to address their concern to the profession, such as formally defined as architecture or planning. Hopefully, I basically answer your question somehow, given the limited time. Thank you.
I have a question following that previous one for all the speakers. So first, I have a comment. I wish we can differentiate urban design as a discipline versus urban design as a field, because I think when we talk about discipline, how it grew out of that history you just demonstrated, it has a lot of limitations that we have read a lot in the literature. And for the question, I will quote Michael Saucon's comment that urban design is ending. And if we believe in urban design and urban design's roles in shaping the future cities, I would like to hear you talk about what is the most critical role for urban designers to play in, let's say, the developing context in China, for example, you guys talked about, and also who do you think are really urban designers? Thank you.
Well, this is maybe pertains to you guys more, but I'll give it a shot. I kind of think the dichotomy is, I think it's an old argument, and maybe we're just replaying the same trope over and over again, and we don't need to, I don't know if we need to define urban design. I think urban designers are people who work in the field. It's just it's a practice, and to have it as a discipline, it's not an established discipline in the U.S. as much, or the U.S. and Canada as much as it is in Europe. But maybe we just need to work more holistically and more transdisciplinary, and not worry about defining it but actually just working through the processes of it. So an urban design program that's interdisciplinary seems to me be the key if we're talking about pedagogy. But yeah, one interesting comment too that I have is it seems like people are leaving out landscape architecture quite a bit from the urban design conversation. I've noticed that the last 2 days, and I think it's partly because people lump that in with architecture, like building architecture and landscape architecture, but to me it seems that, like, this is a critical field, and even though it's a minority field, it's, you know, landscape architecture, it's like the Canada is to North America, landscape architecture is to urban design. It's critical. So
I'm going to hold the questions for here because we're already running over time. So I would ask, know that there's a couple more questions. I wish you can ask them in the hallway over a cup of coffee while we're waiting for our last keynote speech.
Could we just go on for that last student question? Because I think it's a very important point.
Well, we'll have some time after the last keynote to have kind of a reflection on what we've heard in the past 2 days, and we can continue the conversation there.